Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's live online panel with Bossed Up. I am your host, Emilie Aries, the founder and CEO of Bossed Up, and I'm so delighted to welcome so many of you as you find your way into our Zoom panel today. As you make your way in and get comfortable and settle in for the next powerful hour we'll be spending together, go ahead and find the chat function in Zoom. It's either at the top or bottom of your screen. You might have to click a more button that has 3 little dots on it. Open up chat and weigh in first by telling us where you're tuning in from. We always get folks from all over the country and even sometimes across the globe tuning in for these, and we love to hear where folks are coming in from. So that's a great way to get us started. Hello. I have to say, we've been hosting panels like this since last week, really trying to meet your immediate needs as we are all just finding our bearings. Hello, Emilie Aries, little sis in the house. I just saw you coming in from South Windsor, Connecticut, my hometown. How cute. I want to give you a shout out, but we've been trying to respond in real time as we've all been navigating the chaos and the uncertainty and really the fear that has come with the COVID-19 health crisis. So let's all just take a deep breath. There's a lot of nerves, there's a lot of energy running high with all of us, especially in the job market right now. And I want you to know that you're in the right place. You're in the right place for community, for support, for some fantastic speakers who are going to share great practical advice with you in just a moment. And you're in good company. Our panels last week on working from home without losing work-life balance, managing remote teams, managing your money in a crisis like this. And what was the other one? There was a third one. Oh, managing stress and uncertainty. They got hundreds of people joining us live, and you can watch those replays right on our blog if you missed them. But I have to share, this has been the most popular by far. We had almost 500 people register for today, and obviously we can see they're from all over. So we're so delighted to have you here. If this is your first time joining Bossed Up online, let me know. I would love to hear from you in particular. And I want you to just take one quick moment to think about your intent behind today's panel. Why did you choose to join us today? Welcome to our first timers and to our veteran bosses who've been around the block before with me. I want to give you a little bit of background to those of you who are new as we get started. I'm a speaker, an author, a podcast host. If you love podcasts, definitely subscribe to the Bossed Up podcast. I really cover gender inclusion at work and helping people of all genders and across the gender spectrum advocate for themselves at work. My background in politics was one about organizing, creating power on a grassroots level, and helping people own that power over their own lives and in their own careers. My book, Bossed Up, A Grown Woman's Guide to Getting Your Shit Together, was just published about 7 months ago now. It's available on Audible if you're looking for some quarantine reads. And it really chronicles my own story of burning out and bossing up, right? Learning how to own my power over my career. And it chronicles not only my journey and practical advice to doing so yourself, but the journey of 15 other women who do not share my background, who are across industries, across geographies, across backgrounds, and how they're owning their power and making their voice heard. So if that sounds like what you'd like more of, subscribe to the podcast for bi-weekly episodes every Tuesday and Thursday. We're responding in real time to your needs. And for those of you who've been facing layoffs recently, tomorrow's episode is going to be all about what you need to do now, if that's where you're at. In fact, for those of you who are here, I want to ask you to weigh in via chat to tell us why you chose to join us today. Why did you choose to tune in to today's conversation? And I'm going to send out a little poll. Wow, we have almost 200 people on. That's amazing. I'm going to share a poll to first ask, and so our panelists really know where you're coming from, where you're at in your job search right now. I'm going to launch that poll. So for those of you tuning in on your web browser, on your computer, you should be able to weigh in on this poll. I'll give you about 30 seconds. I'm so sorry to hear about so many of you who have been facing layoffs right now. The sad reality is that you're in very good company. For those being furloughed or laid off or fired, it is a very scary time, and there's so many of us facing that right now. And job insecurity is across the board right now. I think a lot of folks are feeling that way. But it is interesting to see how folks have been answering this poll. I'll give you about 5 more seconds to weigh in on the poll. Wow, almost all of you have. 82% of you have voted already. Get your final votes in if you haven't yet. 3, 2, 1, end poll. Okay, I'm going to share these results. It's interesting to see. So just under 20% of you were just laid off, and I am so sorry to hear that. We're going to tackle that question today. Some of you, 30% have been searching for a while who currently have employment. 35% have been searching for a while and do not currently have employment, and some of you are searching soon. So we are in a variety of perspectives that we're coming from today that our panelists can speak to. Let me find a way to hide this poll now. Go away, poll. All right, let me do that. Where is that going? Okay. Well, you are in the right place regardless of your current situation. We're going to get down to brass tacks and really provide some tactical and practical ways forward. I see so many different responses coming in here. Thank you for sharing. We're going to do our best to keep track of this. I have to share my 2 colleagues, Ellie and Kirby, are on the line from Bossed Up, helping to manage chat too. So if you have any questions, feel free to weigh in there. And I just noticed a lot of you are sending your messages just to us panelists. So there's a little drop-down menu at the bottom of your chat bar. Make sure you select to all panelists and to all attendees so that everybody can see your comments here. All right. Without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to our fabulous panelists today. First and foremost, Kyle Inselman, who joins us as a career professional, a writer, an advocate in trans inclusion in particular. He and I first met at Her DU, a fantastic, what is it, the 20th anniversary or the 25th anniversary of this fantastic conference for women's empowerment and women's leadership development held at Denver University, where I had the pleasure of speaking and got to see Kyle win an incredible award for being such a rock star. So glad to have you here, Kyle. Becky Bush, just to follow the order here. Becky Bush is joining us as a tech professional in Silicon Valley and the blogger behind the fantastic blog called The Typical 20-Something. You may have heard her on the Bossed Up podcast in the past, and we're delighted to have you back here. Thanks for being here, Becky. And last but certainly not least, Ahyiana Angel, who's the author and podcaster behind Switch, Pivot, or Quit. She's a career services professional, an incredible writer, an advocate who can help you advocate for yourself in your job search, especially for those of you who are transitioning industries right now. I have been talking and podcasting so much in the last week, I can already hear my voice starting to waver. So I'm going to hand it over to our incredible panelists for the day. Go ahead and unmute yourselves, folks, if you haven't yet. Let's start at the harsh beginning, right? Because we know that almost 20% of folks here are facing and have faced a layoff. And the sad reality is that there's a prediction that there will be even more in the days and weeks to come. I feel like finding yourself forced into a job search is never the best way to start a job search on your own terms. So what advice do you have for folks when it comes to dealing with the shock and refocusing on the future? Ahyiana, would you like to take that question first? I'd love to hear from you.
Sure. The first thing that I would like to offer, first I would say that, just remember, although this time feels very isolated, especially because we are self-isolating, you're not alone in the struggles that you're facing right now. Even people who are facing struggles who are not talking about it, people are trying to comprehend, they're trying to understand what's happening. So you're definitely not alone. But I will say that sometimes what feels like the worst thing that could happen to you can actually turn out to be the best thing. And I'm not saying that because it's a cliche thing. I actually just witnessed it with my father. So to tell you guys a little story, my dad is 59 years old. He had been working at the same company for 25 plus years. I guess you could say it's more of a tech company. They make disk drives and things like that. He's a technician, definitely should have been an engineer by this time, but he didn't have the actual education behind it, right? Mm-hmm. So he's been at this company all these years. In June, he found out that he was going to get laid off. And they said, we're going to keep you for 3 months. We're going to keep you through July, up through August, but you're going to get laid off. Then they extended it again. Now, the first thing that he did, which was smart, and I must say I advised him of this, when they asked, can you stay because there's still more work, I said, ask for a retention bonus. Ask for a retention bonus. So that's something that you guys can think about. If some of your companies are struggling right now and they know that they're going to lay you off, and then they ask you to stay on because they do need you to do a little more work, ask them for some type of bonus to stay on to do more work. So that's one thing, because that will come in handy for you later. And then when the time, so then his time was extended to the end of the year. When the new year came, he was unemployed. Hell of a way to start the new year, especially at 59 years old. Everyone was telling him this is going to be really hard. You're older. Age discrimination is a real thing. All of these things, right? So he could have been really, really negative, but he wasn't. And what he did was he took his time. He didn't start looking for a new job until the new year when he could really focus. And when I tell you, my dad had so many interviews lined up. And so now, I'm not trying to tell his business, but he's working at Tesla, and I think he got an amazing job. And he was, this is later on in life. He was working somewhere for 25 years. So sometimes what you think is the worst thing is not the worst thing. He's making more money now. It's a more exciting position. So I just want to encourage people who are thinking, gosh, this is the worst. It might not be the worst thing to happen to you, actually.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's hard to hear sometimes when you're just reeling, but that story illustrates just how much is unknown and how uncertainty isn't always bad, right? Uncertainty can sometimes equal opportunity. Becky or Kyle, would you like to add to that as I find a pen over here to take notes?
So one of the reasons why I ended up starting a website to support 20-somethings in their job search was because I was laid off at 22, 6 months out of college, moved to San Francisco, one of the most expensive cities in the world, walk into my job one morning and was told I needed to leave. My entire team, not just me, needed to leave in a short amount of time. Obviously, it was a devastating experience. I was living in a 500 square foot apartment for more money than I could ever imagine. I had nothing in the bank account and, had family begging me to come back home, not take this risk. And just to share a little bit more about my story, I think I spent that afternoon crying. The next day, got to work and got 4 job offers in 3 months. Now, obviously, times are different, but I do want to share just a couple of tips and tricks that I learned from that particular experience. So one, I saw a lot of people in the comments mention that they were laid off because of the situation right now in the environment. And I think when you're sharing your career story, because you will be networking and you will be talking to people so soon, even if you feel stuck right now, to really clarify that it was the environment and not you individually, if that was your scenario. I think that's great. When I was laid off, one of the best things that recruiters told me was, oh, it makes perfect sense. You're looking for a job right now, and this has nothing to do with you. And that immediate trust is there. The second thing is just taking the time to make your resume perfect using tools like Canva. It's a free tool online, or other resume templates that you can find if you're more design challenged as I might be individually, to create great resumes. And I do think that it might be harder to find, but people are still hiring and at least networking right now. Everyone has a lot of time. Everyone's stuck at home. And so just starting to think about what you can do to network and at least reach out to people right now. And I'm so sorry that so many people are in this situation. My heart goes out to you, but I'm so confident we'll get through it together, and just know that we're all thinking you all.
Absolutely. Thank you, Becky. Kyle, you work with students in particular, which is kind of like they're always seeing their end date in sight, and that can be so anxiety provoking. Might not be the exact same thing as a layoff, but what advice do you have for students, especially who are kicked out of campus right now, and graduation dates, like my little sister who's tuning in right now, really devastated that formal demarcation of the end of college is no longer going to happen?
Yeah, I think that it's an especially challenging time when you have so much uncertainty happening and you already knew that there was going to be a big transition in your life.
Yeah.
What I would tell my students, and I haven't talked with many yet because it is spring break where I work right now, but what I would assure them is that it is, you know, there's a lot that is changing, but there's also a lot that is the same. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, as us as staff and faculty, you know, we're scrambling to change everything online. We're also still here to support. And I think that anything that students were already starting to do or about to start to do, that doesn't change. Like Becky
Totally.
already said, the resume, the networking, those are going to be the same. And what I always tell students is that the first couple years after graduation, it's okay if it's a little bit of a bumpy start. I graduated in the last recession, and it took a while before I found a full-time job. But you know, I had these little ones along the way where I learned amazing skills. I got to try new things, move all up and down the Front Range here in Colorado. And it will work out, even if it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
feel like it right now. As long as you're continuing to do the right things, put yourself out there, network, it will be okay, even if we can't see that right now.
I love that. I always say, you know, when it's hard to have confidence in your ability to figure it out. Like, it's okay to not know exactly where you're going. Know that you will know how to navigate whatever comes your way. Like, have confidence in your abilities, in your future ability to figure things out. Before we get off the topic of layoffs, I would ask Ellie or Kirby if you could pop in today's brand new blog post. I literally just hit publish on this less than an hour ago. It's got 5 concrete steps that you absolutely must take if you find yourself furloughed, laid off, or fired right now. I know you might be in a tailspin of emotions, so I want to make sure to leave you with the best path forward for prioritizing, I should say, your basic needs right now. Even before you actually make your job search a priority, I break down things like what's happening in Congress and the benefits that you have available to you now, how to file for unemployment, how to handle the fact that so many are filing for unemployment, how to look at your emergency financial standpoint and situation, and lots more resources in there. So if you find yourself laid off right now, take a moment to read that over or listen to the podcast version that'll come out tomorrow morning, and know that we're here for you. With these incredible career services professionals, I want to get your take on the industry overall, the industry impact. So no one really knows exactly what's happening, what's happened, or what is going to happen in terms of the spread of this virus. You know, I think we're hoping for the best due to early mitigation. We're all taking steps to self-isolate, to quarantine, to not put people at risk. So what are some industries doing, or what can, what are the different impacts facing different industries? What industries should we not be applying to jobs for right now, for instance, and where might we focus our attention instead? Because like you said, Becky, there still are people hiring, but there are a lot of industries that aren't. So anyone have a take on that? I'd love to hear from you.
I would say,
okay. Go ahead, Ahyiana.
No, I was just going to say, just quickly, I would just try to be mindful and avoid anything that is traditionally person to person. And although that seems obvious, sometimes there's so many things that we engage with day to day, or companies we may want to work at, but we don't realize what they're really truly in the business of. I think that industries that are going to continue to grow and that are currently still hiring, and I'm hearing this from friends, tech. Mm-hmm. Or industries that deal heavily in tech and they have a lot of forward-thinking elements to their business, they're not really missing a beat. I know people who are currently interviewing. I know people who are making announcements that they have sealed the deal on this job that they were interviewing for. So I think it's just being mindful of the industries that can withstand not having that person-to-person contact, and thinking of also the companies in the industries that are forward-thinking, because a lot of businesses that we love, that we know and love, they are staples within our society, but they are also doing business an old way and they're stuck in the past. And they may seem like an appealing company to work for, but when you think about it, do their values align with yours in terms of what you're looking for, in terms of advancement, in terms of technology? And I think right now is a really good time for a lot of companies to test how they can really move forward with our society and allow people to work from home and things of that nature. But I think there's a lot of opportunities out there. It's just going to be a little harder for us to see them right now.
Totally. Kyle, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I've been reading as many blog posts as I can about what is happening in different industries, because we know that hospitality, restaurants, those things are where people are getting laid off from. But I
Right.
was surprised in some of these early articles to see that some fields like communications, they're hiring a lot, even government. If you hop onto sites like USA Jobs or government jobs and search for contract or immediate hire, I've seen a couple like public health positions opening up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just, what are these forward thinking companies and these ones that have more remote work options, but also who are the companies that are responding to the crisis, and where can those transferable skills be useful in that response as well.
Totally. In fact, Allison in the chat here mentions the nonprofit sector, and I would lump them in with the government in this capacity, because a lot of the emergency funding that's coming down from the government right now, while it's still all being worked out, a lot of that likely will be dispersed through the nonprofit sector, who can do direct service to help people. So if you are interested in that kind of work as well, keep an eye on and start those conversations with the nonprofits in your neighborhood or in your region that you care most about. Becky, did you want to add on?
I think adding on, as someone in tech myself, I absolutely believe that any digital or online industry is a great place to be. One, caution or something to think about, and I saw someone wrote this in the chat as well. When looking at startups, be mindful of their cash flow. With the economic systems changing, there could be risks in going to a small startup that maybe needs their next round of funding and is relying on things that the economy could change in the future. So just something to be mindful of, and certainly something that you can discuss in the interview, their long-term plans and where they are within those rounds. That being said, as a blogger as well, I do see, and Pinterest is actually a weirdly great resource for this, tons of ideas for jobs, for digital online contract jobs, if you're looking for something maybe shorter term or some sort of side hustle.
Yeah.
There are so many digital businesses that need help, that need freelance writers, contractors, etc., that are thriving, and that can be a great source of income in the interim.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm seeing a lot of anxiety, for lack of a better word, in chat right now over some of what you all spoke to, balancing that short-term need for a paycheck and the long-term risk of, am I going to hop into a startup that has no funding in a month? Or am I going to jump into a big company that has a legacy brand but doesn't share my values? One of my key takeaways that I write a lot about at Bossed Up, Kirby, I wonder if you could find the article on this. Actually, there's an article and a webinar recording with Flex Jobs, is about the concept of a bridge job. Back in the recession, so many of us had to take what I call a bridge job to pay the bills, to make ends meet. That might not be your dream job and might not be exactly where you thought your career was headed right now, but it gets you a little closer in that direction. So whether it's a bridge job just to cover your expenses or a bridge job that's not ideal, but you're taking it now because you have to, I just want to clarify that that's okay to do as well. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of uncertainty right now. You may be job searching with a bridge job for a little while, and that's in some ways can be less anxiety inducing than job searching without any income coming in. So whether you pursue a side hustle, get creative, get entrepreneurial right now, or jump into a job that might not be your forever job, this hiring paralysis that we've seen last week and this week, I'm convinced it's not going to last very long. Like, a hiring freeze has been put into place in a lot of places because we don't know what's happening with the illness. Once the scientists and once the public health officials can give us a better handle on what's happening there in the next couple of weeks, I don't think we're going to stay in total paralysis for very long.
But, and oh, sorry, go ahead.
No,
I was saying another way to think about this with companies, a lot of companies' budgets are decided at the beginning of the year. That has not changed for the entire year. So even if there's some sort of hiring freeze right now and you feel like all things are hopeless, they're not getting rid of those jobs unless the company doesn't have cash flow, or maybe there's something else going on underlying in the company. But again, Jan 1st is where most of those budgets are decided for hiring throughout the year. So feel hope that those hirings will still happen. And I totally agree with Emilie. Although it feels like forever, and although all the information coming at us can be very overwhelming, it is not forever. And I think that's a great stat just to remember as comfort to yourself.
Absolutely. I love it. All right, let's talk about what's not changed. It does feel like everything's changed, and you alluded to this already. I think it was Kyle, right? Some principles of job searching have remained true. So maybe we're in a more competitive job search market than before. Perhaps it's a little more competitive because there's more people looking and there's more people competing over jobs. What are some key principles to keep in mind to make sure that folks are at the top of that pack, that they're really doing everything they can to stand out and be as persuasive as possible when presenting themselves to a prospective employer?
Yeah, so I'm all about going back to basics. And that means when you're applying, write that cover letter to the company. Why this company? Why this position? Why are you the right fit? And same with resumes. You want to tailor it, do that keyword matching. Sometimes my students don't believe me when I tell them that the most useful technique I learned from my career counselor was to print out a job description and highlight the keywords, make sure that they show up on my resume. That one trick started getting me more and more interviews immediately when I started using it, because I had that keyword alignment, not just for that match in the application system, but also for the person reading it to say, hey, you've done your research and we see why you're a good fit for this. So that is one tried and true that is important to focus on at this time. It's just that refresh and going back to the basics. And the other thing that hasn't changed, I'd say, is that networking piece. So maintaining that even though it's virtual now.
Definitely.
Yep. One of the biggest tactics that I know, Emily, you talk about frequently as well. I think you call it the internal referral at companies. I usually call it cold emailing, but it's emailing people directly at companies. I know you stress this constantly, so don't want to beat a dead horse, but it's just the concept of reaching out to people directly at the companies as you apply or as you see jobs open. Or maybe there's a dream company of yours that you've had your eye on for a while and you don't see any jobs open online, but you want to reach out directly. That networking piece is so easy to do digitally. LinkedIn, guess their email address, write them notes directly, and get in touch and allow them to refer you directly to their position. I think in addition to resumes and cover letters, that's something that you can do that no one else is doing, and it will set you apart from the pack.
Let's talk a little bit more about that, because I've heard you give some background on this that's super helpful. How many emails would you say that you sent like that? A cold email to a person working in a company when you were in that 3-month period of unemployment?
Hundreds. I'm relentless. I'm relentless when it comes to this. And I was genuinely told that was some of the reasons why I got interviews for positions, maybe outside of my years of experience or with 6 months after being laid off. And it's really easy to figure out someone's email and to guess someone's email. And potentially, I like to, this probably like, I put it in the BCC normally, so you can guess multiple of their emails and still write that person a note. But LinkedIn's also a great way to do this. And to be honest, I've gotten the question a lot. Actually, I just saw it in the chat if it seems spammy, and I've never gotten that response. I think if you're emailing the same person over and over, it is, but it's more about casting a wide net and trying to get the internal referral. Everyone wants to talk about themselves. Everyone wants to know that you want to work at their company, and hopefully they'll be flattered.
I just want to echo how much that is true, and how not to be unabashed, right? You have to hustle if you're going to put yourself in front of people. So I get the question in our Facebook group, the Bossed Up Courage community, which is a fabulous place where people are constantly sharing resources and advice. Maybe Kirby or Ellie can drop a link in there so that we can invite you to join us as participants. But I've literally seen folks there say, is it awkward if I email them directly? Or is it spammy? Is it weird? I don't want to be annoying. It's like, check yourself, be annoying, risk being a little annoying right now. It is worth the potential risk of being seen as an eager beaver to get in front of people and then ask for a call, ask for a FaceTime hangout, introduce yourself, tell your story. It might be hard to go right from cold email to, would you put in a good word for me? I like to think, okay, write that email, set up the call, ask them about their experience at the company, see what makes them tick, share a little bit about you and why you care so much about joining their team, and then say, I've applied. Here's my, application number in the application tracking system. Can you put in an internal referral for me? Most human beings want to help. So get in there and make your case, advocate for yourself, just like you would for your little sister or for your best friend. Ahyiana, what other principles of job searching strategically do you want folks to take away?
I think that a lot of people, the networking piece is one of the things that we mention a lot, but a lot of people gloss over the fundamental of having a good representation of yourself from all different sides of it. And one thing is your resume, of course, and it's like you see a lot of resumes and people are wondering, why is this not working? But there's some key things that you're not doing within that resume that can make a difference. Like that resume should be perfect. That resume should not be 5 pages long. That resume should probably have significant bullet points. That resume shouldn't just list the things that are normal for that type of position. That resume should say why you're it. What's your it factor? It should tell people why you're dynamic. It should give stats and numbers and percentages of growth, things like that, if possible. I think, you should also, if you don't have the money right now because you may be in a situation where you've just gotten let go, ask friends who you know to be a good writer, who has a good eye, ask them to take a look at it, because you definitely don't want to send out a resume that is riddled with errors, because even though someone may be looking for this person with your skill set, they may overlook it just because it doesn't read well and it doesn't come off well. So I would just look at ways that you can stand out within that resume as well, because that's still a factor, even though it feels like sometimes it's actually not. Oh, Emily, you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I was just saying, totally. What's interesting today is that you have to write your resume both for robots and for humans, and in one sheet. And I'd be curious to hear if we could elaborate on this. Kyle already mentioned how important keyword alignment is. That is to get through the artificial intelligence screeners that are doing a first pass on your resume, deciding whether or not it gets in front of a human being. And then you get it in front of a human being. Does it tell a story, right? Because humans want stories. We want there to be a narrative arc to your story, to your resume, to your cover letter that says, here's why everything I've ever done has led me to you and why I'm perfect for this job. What other resume tips should we keep in mind for either getting through those AI screeners or making the most of being compelling to the human beings that we hope finally take a peek at them?
Well, one tip that I'll share that also applies to the LinkedIn questions that I see in the chat right now is to, let's say that you're transitioning to a different field, or maybe you're just graduating, you don't have that relevant work experience yet. Make sure early on the resume to label yourself professionally. That way, when that human reader, they get the resume in front of them, they see right at the top, oh, social media manager, or professional marketer. They see that label right at the top, and that primes them to pay attention to that on the resume. And it also helps on your LinkedIn, because you don't have to put the most recent job title you had. You're labeling yourself for your career, your professional identity, not just one role that you've had.
Totally. I remember when I was in college, I printed off little Vistaprint business cards that were free because they had the Vistaprint logo on the back, and went to political conferences, like handing them out like candy. And I remember just thinking, I have no career identity right now. I have no career. I'm like 20 years old. And I put communications, political strategy, new media, which is what we used to call digital strategy back in the day, and new media on my card. And I would just hand that out. And all of a sudden, I was now a communications person. I was a new media person. And it helped me land jobs and interviews in that domain. And it is amazing how far that can take you. Thank you.
I love what Kyle said about going back to basics as well. It really, essence of having a clean resume, one that's easy to read. Imagine someone might even be reading it on their phone with those keywords is great. The last tip I'll share just in terms of great resumes is quantifying your experience. This is something I truly believe I think one of the biggest missteps that I see when I'm reviewing resumes is that people are not really visualizing how much work they did and the impact they have. So think about how many people you worked with, how many teams you were cross-functional with, what percentages of the impact can you share before and after a project you did. It may seem small and minute to you because it was part of your everyday job,
Right.
but really helping someone on the other end of that resume visualize and understand the impact you will make to their business will get you so far.
That is so true. I was just working with one of our clients in our hired program on her resume. She's an education and international education professional. And I said, what does this line mean that you worked with this specific team? And she says, oh, well, it means that I managed and trained 9 different people across 13 different countries. And I said, well, I think we should put those numbers in there, because sometimes you gloss over your own numerical impact. And it's really important to emphasize, okay, how many direct reports did you have? How many reports did you produce? Right? How many pages was that screenplay that you wrote for the writer's room? Really quantifying with our clients has taken their resumes to the next level. Ahyiana, any last words that you want to add to rocking your resume or making sure you stand out in this way?
I would say just make sure that you're also using clear language that sort of like anyone can read and understand, because sometimes we get caught up in our industry jargon and it's like the average person who's reading that, especially if you're pivoting or you're making some type of switch in your career, the average person may not understand what that means or how big of a deal that might be, especially when you're talking about quantifying your experience. So just make sure that there's clarity within it and you can sort of read it no matter what side of the coin you're coming from. And that's another way that you might want to reach out to someone and say, hey, does this make sense? Do you understand what I'm saying with this line? I think that will go a long way, because sometimes people just don't respond to things or don't buy in because they just don't understand. They're just like, this is like rocket science. I'm not here for it.
Right.
I can't follow it,
Yeah. And you know what? It reminds me of the same solution to that problem solves another problem that came up in chat like 20 chats ago, which was, how do I make sure I'm not producing errors when I'm updating and constantly updating my resume? And the same solution for jargon is that we have to have another set of eyes on our resume before it goes out. It doesn't matter how great of a writer you are, you can't see the mistakes you're making. So before you send out a new resume of any kind, whatever the update or edit is that you made, get one other human being to read it word for word. Ask for that support unabashedly, and they'll help point out where jargon makes no sense if they're a good friend, right? You got to tell them to be candid with you and say, I'm a little worried that my jargon for the nonprofit sector might not translate to the tech sector that I'm now applying to. I had someone talk about being a development director who was applying to tech jobs. And I said, development means something very different in the nonprofit sector than it does in Silicon Valley. So let's make sure we're translating those things effectively. And yes, to those asking, there's lots of people here who can help you professionally with your resume questions, and we'll share some of those resources at the end. Thanks to everybody for weighing in on chat. I've got one more question for our panelists before I'm going to turn it over to you, the participants. So if you've got a burning question that we have not addressed yet, start thinking of them now, write them in the chat section, and I'll be sure to ask them at least one more question after this one. All right, panelists, networking while isolating. Obviously, for the sake of all of our health and safety, we are not out there having coffee meetings. We are not going to networking events. What can we do? You already talked a little bit about this, Becky, in terms of sending those outreach emails, but how do we take it to the next level? Kaya, what would you recommend?
Yes, this is actually one of my favorite topics to talk about because I always tell a story about my most successful networking. So when I'm working with students, we're always saying get on LinkedIn, get that LinkedIn profile, but we know that not every profession is active on LinkedIn. You might have people who are more active on Twitter, let's say in journalism and politics, more active on Facebook in education. And a couple years ago, there was a Facebook group that I was in, and just use it for professional networking with other student affairs people. Someone posted a call and said, would someone please, if you're interested in writing a chapter with me, like, please comment if you're interested. And there were maybe 9 or 10 of us that commented. We got it down to 3 people, and we wrote this chapter together. It's now published. It's in a book called Debunking the Myth of Job Fit in Student Affairs and Higher Education. And those 2 folks are now great friends and contacts. We're constantly in touch. I'm writing another chapter with one of them. And another one of them was a reference for me for my last job that I applied to, so my current position. And the funniest thing is, I had not talked to either of them on the phone or met them in person at that point.
Wow.
So my boss was the first person who heard one of their voices before me. And we've since met at different conferences, but just because the networking is online, just because it's over social media, it doesn't mean that it's any less real. It is still an authentic, genuine connection. You can still build those friendships, those professional relationships, and still work on awesome projects together. So my takeaway tip for that is just keep it up. And if you're not already using these tools like LinkedIn or different Facebook groups, Twitter, whichever tool it is, like hop on there, find the hashtags for your profession, join groups and participate in the discussion, post articles you found interesting.
Yeah.
And it's going to be helpful now, and it's also going to be helpful later.
Love it. Ahyiana, what would you add to that?
I would say try to set up some virtual meetings with people. I have never FaceTimed as much as I have within this last week. I told my friends that last night we had like an impromptu happy hour hangout together, and I was like, I don't even know how to use all the features on FaceTime because I've never been this invested in FaceTime. But I think it's also fun to extend that to people who you've had casual relationships with, who maybe you've made plans to go to coffee with, but it never panned out because you know how that is. Sometimes you say, let's do it, but you really don't have the intentions of doing it. I feel like now that we're all quarantined, you can actually follow through because it takes less effort on your part to just set up like a video chat with someone. And I think you approach it by making it seem like it's normal. Like, hey, I've been setting up some video meetings this week. Would you be interested in meeting at some point this week? Who's going to say no at this point? You have no excuse. You have nowhere to be. You can't say I'm too busy, right? So I think it's just like taking advantage of this time where everybody is quarantined and just try and get on some people's calendar. And it doesn't have to be extremely long. It can be 15 minutes. It can be 30 minutes, whatever. And then just sort of have an idea of what you want to catch up on, but also don't go into every situation looking to have a career chat or a how can you help me chat. Right now, it's most important to just be human and relatable to other people. So it might just be, I just wanted to check in and have some FaceTime and see, how are you doing? Is there any way that I can help you? Is there any way that I can lend any support to you? And I think that also goes into my next thing that I would just like to share. Maybe instead of just looking for people on LinkedIn that you can reach out to and just drop in their inbox and hit them over the head with what you need, maybe you can drop in their inbox and hit them over the head with, hey, can I help you? I know that your industry is probably still buzzing just based off of what I read or my research, but I'm pretty slow right now. So I'd love to gain some extra experience. Is there anything that I can help you with? Anything maybe I could take off your plate? If you'd like to get to know me a bit better before we establish a working relationship, happy to set up a virtual meeting with you. Just try and be proactive about some things.
It's so interesting how when you flip the script from please, please, please help me to here's how I can help you. Here's how I can be of value to you and your company right now, or any future company. That completely changes the tone, not only of confidence in yourself and your abilities and your sense of self-worth that you walk into that conversation with, which is a fragile thing during a layoff, right? So let's just acknowledge that's just fragile right now. But owning your worth and saying, I have skills and talents and gifts to share with this world. How can I take my job search and turn it into an opportunity to give? And then offering changes the tone. Offering in that way changes the tone of how it's received too.
Right.
Instead of feeling like, I'm so sorry to bug you. Would you please take pity on me? and spare some of your precious time. It's a totally different narrative, but it's the same activity, which is I want to check in on you. At this time, especially, a lot of parents are like working from home, but just barely keeping it together because all of a sudden they've got their kids in the house and life is really stressful right now. Even if you're fortunate enough to have your good health, leading with empathy, like you're saying, and how are you? How can I be of support to you? Is a really smart move. And it's just the kind move to do too.
Right. And, even some of the older generation of workers, they're forced to use like Zoom and stuff now, and they're just not familiar. So if you're a person who's very savvy with tech and with just kind of how to do online meetings and things like that, that might be your in. They may be like, oh my gosh, thank you. I need someone. Even if you think of like, hey, can I help you manage your calendar? Like that means that I'll help you get signed into every Zoom or this or that or whatever, because right now it feels like you're in a place where you could be overwhelmed. And I will just say this, even though I do agree with, the idea of taking chances and asking for things and putting yourself out there, I would also just be mindful and caution people that no one wants to feel used at any point in time. So although you're dropping in people's inbox, you have to remember that this is a sensitive time for a lot of people. And although their company may seem like they're thriving or their job may seem like it's not in jeopardy, you actually don't know if you don't know them. So be sensitive to that as well, because what I like to say is it's not always about you. Sometimes you think this is what I need right now, but you don't know what they're going through. You don't know what they're experiencing. They may not be experiencing anything financial, but they may be experiencing something emotional. So just be mindful of how you approach interacting with people. And I'm also saying that from a perspective of, I have my own podcast. So the Switch, Pivot, or Quit podcast, it is very popular. And there are people who pitch me every single day to be on the show. But sometimes I can tell that you haven't even taken the time to see what's going on here so that you can properly pitch, because if you did, you probably wouldn't even be in my inbox. That's the other thing. Make sure that you're finding the right person too, because if you're going after the wrong person, it could just be annoying because you didn't actually take the time to do your research. You're such in a frenzy and a tizzy about your circumstance that you didn't do the proper due diligence. So that's it. That's it. That's all.
Amen. No, I'm so glad. Thank you. You've got a lot of response in chat right now saying thank you for saying that. Last words, Becky, what else do you want folks to keep in mind here?
So for networking, I totally agree with everything you just said. I think one of the biggest tips that you can think about for your email is just being specific in what you might want to get out of the conversation. And if you can, what value will you bring to them? And let's say there is nothing and it's truly just a networking conversation for you. Something that I often say in these conversations just at the end is, please let me know if I can do anything for you in the future. You've opened the door, you've offered to do something for them. Write them a thank you note. If you can, handwritten thank you note. I think it's so classy, or else via email within 24 hours always, and just be specific about what you want to talk about. And I totally agree, do your research and show them that you have gone above and beyond to understand what they do.
I think that's really smart. Also, just a plug, I'm a big believer in a thank you gift. And I know when resources are tight, it can be really hard, but if someone is really sticking their neck out for you, or even if you just had an amazing interview, it shouldn't be something too over the top, because then it seems like a bribe, and you do want to check your industry specifics about bribery, because I know like campaigns, government officials can't do this, but I send those little Sugarfina candy boxes like all the time. I send on brand, value aligned thank you notes or treats all the time. And it helps seal the deal. And talk about classy, it makes such a profound impression. $10 gift card to Starbucks is a perfect example. Your next coffee's on me. Those little notes pay off in full. Like that is an investment that pays it off or pays it back, pays it forward. One of those, all of those. Becky?
Yeah, I was just going to add, even when I've left a job or been laid off, if you have the time to just write those handwritten thank you notes, it actually goes a long way in having people call you back for the future. So +1 there. And thank you for mentioning it.
I love that. Excellent. All right, y'all, I'm seeing so many questions in chat about negotiation. I'm going to put that aside. Bossed Up has a ton of negotiation resources, including a downloadable, comprehensive step-by-step negotiation guide that we'll link to you in the chat here. So if you've got negotiation questions, find that there. One quick question that I think we have time for that came up in chat is, what is an appropriate way to follow up with a hiring manager or an HR department after you've had a great interview, to check in on the status of your application, or maybe even before that initial interview, but just to check in? What is the best way to go about doing that?
I can take that one. So
Go ahead, Kyle.
okay, yeah. I'm always a fan of just a really quick email. When I work with students, I have them kind of set for themselves what schedule do they want to use for follow-up. Is it every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks? It's going to depend on the industry. It's going to depend even on the organization. I've definitely interviewed at universities that are like, please don't contact us, we'll contact you.
Okay.
But others that are really appreciative of it, where you have that person you can reach out to and say, hey, I just wanted to check in on the status of my application. I really enjoyed the interview that we had and just still looking forward to the potential of working with you. It can be short and sweet, doesn't have to be anything more than that.
Mm-hmm.
The line I always use is, my conversation with X confirmed my desire that I think I could bring great value to this company in this role. It's as simple as that, but totally agree. Something short, sweet, and just checking in. And I do agree that there is a balance between doing it too much and not enough. I think depending on where you are, it could be once a week, I think would be comfortable and fine. But if you know that something's supposed to come down the pipeline, no harm in doing it slightly more frequently. But I don't think there's a perfect science, and just go with your gut.
Yeah, it's also a good reminder that in the interview, you should be asking, what are the next steps? What's the timeline look like?
Yeah.
And if you didn't ask in the interview, I think it's okay to ask in the email too. That way you sort of push yourself closer to getting a response, because maybe the question is just, hey, wanted to check in and see what the timeline is. Is there a time frame that I can expect to hear from you in, or something like that, just so that maybe they'll respond.
Absolutely. And I think, given that we're all under very unusual, unprecedented, and scary circumstances, it's more important than ever, taking your message to heart, Ahyiana, to be empathic with people. Add that little line at the top of your email saying, I hope this finds you and your family, loved ones, safe and healthy. Given the circumstances right now, I just wanted to pop back in and check in. So it's okay to acknowledge, kind of give a little verbal hat tip to what's happening globally, and get to the point quickly, right? Get to the point, and don't not send the email because everything's crazy right now. I would always say, draw your own boundaries, right? Set your boundaries for your mental health and well-being, and allow other people to set theirs too. But don't set them for them. All right. If you want to keep up with these fine folks, make sure to find them on LinkedIn, right? Find these talented panelists on their website, Switch, Pivot, or Quit, the typical 20-something. Kyle, is there a particular place that you want folks to follow you? Is it on Twitter?
Yeah, actually really easy. Just go to my website, kyleinselman.com. And I also have a Facebook page, Kyle Inselman Career Coach, that folks can follow.
Awesome. I know there's a lot of people who could use our help right now. So I want to wrap up today's conversation knowing that you will also get this recording in your inboxes in just a few if you want to revisit it. But I want to leave you with some key resources, and Ellie and Kirby on my team will help drop some resources that you might need, as they've been doing this entire hour in chat. Here at Bossed Up, it's our mission to help you craft a happy, healthy, and sustainable career, and that has not changed. One of the ways that we're doing that right now is by reopening Hired, a job search accelerator that I'd actually closed after we hit our max capacity last month, but we've reopened and have a handful of spots left. It is an intensive program that is 3 months long for folks who are looking to make a very mindful and thoughtful career transition, who are headed to find their next job and make that next job their dream job. This is for you if you want a lot of support right now. It comes with weekly video lessons, weekly accountability calls with myself and a group of no more than 5 people. It is all about fine-tuning your job search skills, your self-advocacy skills for the modern job search, understanding how AI screeners can keep your resume from ever being seen by a human, understanding how to tell your personal story in a powerful and compelling way. We really bring folks together in small groups of like-minded peers so that you do not need to do this alone. So that you can get real-time feedback, not only from me, but from a group of your peers. We just finished the resume week with one of our cohorts, and it was just amazing to see 5 people's resumes in a row as we all worked on applying the same philosophies and tactics and tools to different industries and different seniority levels, and seeing just how profoundly improved and more compelling those resumes can become. You'll get access to an online platform through Thinkific where you can go at your own pace, and your weekly assignments are then reviewed by me and as a group on your weekly accountability calls with your group. If you're interested, we've reopened just now. So we actually reopened yesterday just so that we can create a new cohort for the month of April. There's 2 different levels that you can work with me on, either the basic level, which includes everything I just described, or the premier level, which also comes with a one-on-one monthly call, strategy call with myself and you alone. There's only 3 spots left as of literally right before we hopped on this webinar. It's been a very busy day. So you can find out more at bossedup.org/get-hired. And that's a very intensive program for those who are really ready to invest in making this next job transition the right one. But I do want to share that here at Bossed Up, we believe in lifting as we climb. We believe in striving together and aiming to thrive by lifting others up as well. So we are providing as many free resources as we can right now, including but not limited to that article I mentioned on how to respond if you've been laid off right away. And next week at Bossed Up, we will be offering one-off intensive interactive workshops that include breakout sessions that, unlike a panel, we're actually going to dig into the tools and tactics behind your resume, behind your networking approach, behind your interview best practices to really help provide more hands-on support. So make sure you keep an eye on your inbox because I will email you with updates on that. And then the last thing I wanted to mention that I kind of forgot to bring up until now, but seems worthwhile, is the one-on-one coaching that I'm also now offering. So I know all of the folks on here can help you with your resume, so reach out to them. But if you just need to talk to someone right now or sometime later this week about your resume, your cover letter, LinkedIn strategy, interview prep, negotiation, those are all now available to do. There's a limited number of slots available because there's a limited amount of time in the day, but we have made those available for the first time in many years to do directly with me. So I will email these resources out to everybody right after today's call. I'll upload the recording and send that to you as well. And I just want to say thank you so much to the incredible panelists who've joined me here, and to the Bossed Up team for turning around, 5 panels in a week in response to this, for creating this powerful space where people can lift as they climb. Thank you all so much for being here.